Do we really need the 40-hour work week? Well, this video was inspired by a video from my friend, Demi V, and I wanted to share my own thoughts on the discussion of whether we really need a 40-hour work week. I'll share my perspectives of the value of the 40-hour work week, plus review some of the arguments presented in the video. If you're new, hi, my name is Luki, and I create educational videos on jobs, careers, and life. If you're looking for some practical tips, advice, and life lessons, subscribe to stay up to date. Now let's start with how COVID changed the way many people work. If that's the case, shouldn't the number of hours worked change as well? For some history of the 40-hour work week, Henry Ford popularized it in 1926, almost 100 years ago. But what many people don't realize is before, the work week was even longer. People were working 7 days a week. So be thankful that you weren't working before 1926. Before then, you could work as long as the company told you to. Then a US law passed in 1938, requiring employers to pay overtime for more than 44 hours, which changed to 40 hours in 1940. So our notion of the 40-hour work week is really 60 years old. Before we dig in, let's chat a bit about when a 40-hour work week might be appropriate. Some industries are paid based on being there. I call those attendance jobs. You can't really be paid unless you're there. Folks in hospitality and security are often compensated by their time being there, often at an hourly rate. Other jobs are output jobs. Those are about what you produce versus how long you're there. Like a computer coder or a marketer, where it's often about the quality of output that's rewarded, like clean and efficient code in the case of a developer, or campaigns that get lots of visibility and engagement in the case of a marketer. For those jobs, the assumption is that if you're in the office or online, you're working. Though we know from COVID that might not actually be true. Sometimes jobs are a combination of both, time and output. If you look at, let's say, a construction worker, that would be attendance, since the person actually has to physically be there. Though, if they could get what they needed to do faster, then they might not need to be there for the whole time. If we go back to the 40-hour work week, employers are essentially paying for your time. For attendance jobs, paying for time makes sense. For results jobs, why do we use time as a unit of payment? In that case, we're actually incentivized to take longer. For example, let's say we have an output work where you have to write code or create social media posts or whatever for work. Employee A does it in 8 hours and employee B does it in 4 hours. Who should get paid more? In a pay-for-time model, A takes longer, so they should get paid more. That doesn't make sense. Why would you pay someone more if they could renovate your house in 8 months versus someone who takes only 4? Assuming that both are the same quality, you would pay more for the person that can do it faster. Same in this case. Who would you pay more? The employee that took 8 months to complete a project, or the one that took 4 months? Assuming again that both had the same quality of output. The 4 months, of course. Some employers have already switched their mindset and become a results-oriented work environment. Employees have expectations set on their output, and they're measured on their output, not their attendance, i.e. the number of hours worked. Now, wouldn't that promote laziness? Well, if you're calling being effective and efficient lazy, then yes. Keep in mind that employees have to meet their output expectations. So in that case, there's no real laziness involved. And keep in mind that their efficiency and effectiveness often comes from years of training. There's a story of a shipping company that had a huge container ship whose engine wasn't working, and it seemed fine, yet all the engineers couldn't get it working. They called in an expert who was legendary at getting the engines to work. He studied the engine for a few minutes, he found a spot on the engine, grabbed a mallet and whacked it as hard as he could, and suddenly the engine came roaring to life. He told the owner of the company, "That'll be $10,000, please." And the owner said, "Whoa, hold on. You were here for like 10 minutes and all you did was whack a spot on the engine with a hammer? I want to see an itemized receipt." The expert said, "Sure." And there were 2 items listed. Whacking the engine with the mallet? Free. 20 years of experience on knowing exactly where to hit the mallet? $10,000. So if expected results are set up properly, the company is getting what they paid for since the employee is delivering on what they said. Now the opposite is true as well. If the employee has to deliver 40 widgets and it's Friday at 5 p.m. and they've only done 35, then they should keep working until 40 widgets are complete. That's also where practices like performance management come in. If employee B starts working and produces 40 widgets a week over week, then when can they ask for a raise? Well, in theory, never. They were hired to produce 40 widgets a week and they do that. But if employee B produces 44 widgets over a week, then could they ask for a 10% raise? In theory, yes. Well, they might not get the full 10%, but it should be more than zero. By the way, if you want help in making more money at work, then you can check out this video. And if the employee continues to produce more results, they should continue to get raises, at least in theory, though there's probably a capacity max for any given role. And with technology, there might actually be an infinite increase because with enough time and innovation, they might be able to do more and more and more. Before we dive into the arguments provided in the video, I want to tell you about the Focus Inspired Academy, which is your gym for career confidence. Go deeper into jobs, careers, and life, plus get group coaching to help. Click on the link on the description box below for a free 1-month trial for supporting the channel. Now, let's dive into the arguments provided by the video. The first was the 40-hour work week is not based on best practices. Actually, that's not true. As we mentioned earlier, there was a cap on working hours placed, and that was done to help worker productivity. So it was based on best practices at the time. But given that times and the nature of work has changed, those best practices are no longer relevant today. And I definitely agree that we have to rethink the way productivity is measured. Another argument was that it applies to only certain jobs. Well, agreed. As we mentioned before, this is distinguished between the attendance jobs versus the output jobs. Third argument is we don't want to let employees get overworked. While this information is great, it doesn't really factor into the discussion about a 40-hour work week. We're not advising folks to work more. We're actually hoping that they can work less. Another comment was that millennial workers have different views on work. And I agree that this needs to be considered if you want to hire from the millennial workforce. However, these views don't reflect the entire generation. So if you're lucky, you might be able to hire someone with a more old school mentality, or if you can't hire those, you might have to actually adjust your work practices to entice those millennials to join your team. Another argument was thinking about work when not at work. Well, that's a good point. Part of that is giving credit for your work that's done after hours. Though it would be a different way to justify your productivity by saying that I was thinking about work and came up with a strategy last night when I was walking the dog, which is why I only came in for 6 hours instead of 8 hours today. Though that being considered, it could be valid. Another argument was about personal admin tasks being done during the workday. And this argument is less about the 40-hour workday and more around the typical 9-to-5 workday. Many employers these days provide flexibility for employees to manage around their commitments, and they can drop off kids and pick up the kids, but they might work an extra hour or two after the kids are in bed to make up for the productivity. If we move to a results-oriented workplace, then those extra hours might not even be necessary, unless of course you're looking for a raise or a promotion. There's another argument about the CERB versus the minimum wage, which is definitely valid because many businesses were struggling to find minimum wage employees while the government benefits were still ongoing. Though, again, it doesn't really have anything to do with the 40-hour work week and more pointing to a system flaw, as the video mentioned. Another aspect is technology and working whenever and wherever. Again, not much against the 40-hour work week and more the typical 9-to-5 work from the office expectation. The examples are great, as Microsoft Japan Work for Choice Challenge, which gave its 2,300 person workforce 5 Fridays off in a row without changing pay, and that showed a 40% productivity improvement. So that makes a case that working 32 hours versus 40 hours could actually increase productivity. And it's also supported by another example the video provided about Perpetual Guardian also doing something similar. The video had an argument where people can't concentrate for more than 4 to 5 hours and only work 3 hours out of an 8-hour day anyway. And the 4 to 5 hours is actually reasonable given that folks have a lunch break in between. And the note about working 3 out of 8 hours is, again, a different challenge where employers are really being paid for 3 hours of productivity versus 8. Now, does that mean if they were in the office for 3 hours, then they'd be just as productive? Perhaps. If someone knew they only had 3 hours to get done what they needed to, they would be much more productive. If you've ever been wrapping up work before you have to head off for vacation, you know that you can be hyper productive when you need to be. One of the last arguments was the government retirement homes reducing to 30 hours, and the employees were happier and less stressed. And it'd be interesting to understand what the return on investment for happier and less stress would be. It mentioned that only 10% was offset, and what could have also been considered was those happier and less stressed employees might have allowed for retirement home seniors to be better served or resulted in more revenue. And I'm not sure if that's the case, but taking a look at the effect of being happier and less stressed would be helpful. It could also be a longer term consideration if they kept the experiment going for multiple years. In summary, what do you think? Should we get rid of the 40-hour work week? Or are you someone working in an employer that already works 4 days a week? Is it time to modernize the way we work? Comment below with your thoughts. Remember to share this video with a friend and let me know if you have any questions or what you're struggling with in your job search or career, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe for more tips on jobs, careers, and life. And YouTube recommends that you check out these videos next. Until next time, be focused and stay inspired.